Well, good evening, Mayor, council members. For the record, Peter Isaki, Director of Community Development, joined by Michael Hall, City Planner. We'll be giving you a presentation on EV charging stations and new House bill that was passed and approved and adopted last year pertaining to this particular topic. Before I turn it over to Michael, I just want to introduce just kind of a broad sort of picture of why we're discussing this, and Michael will get into the details of the bill itself. As you all know, over the last 3 to 4 years, the state legislature has been introducing and adopting many bills related to land use, to housing, and this is basically one of those bills that was adopted in 2024. We do qualify. This bill is subject to the city of Evans based on our population. This bill primarily, although it is a land use bill, considered a land use bill because it requires municipalities to adopt zoning and land use regulations pertaining to electric vehicle charging facilities. The big picture of this bill is how the state can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions in the long term. So there's been a number of bills introduced and passed over the last several years that pertain to Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPOs, to reduce vehicle mile traveled. Basically, the state is in the process of quote unquote electrifying, right? There's a push to even reduce natural gas facilities like stoves and fireplaces and things of that nature, all in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So today we'll go ahead and cover the background of HB 241173, how it pertains and how it impacts the city of Evans, what are our sort of decision points that we need to make here over the next couple of months. And of course, we're open up for discussion if you have any questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Great. Thank you, Peter. I'm happy to be here this evening explaining this to you. So a couple things when it comes to the House bill. We did receive this as a notification from the Colorado Energy Office several months ago, and really what prompted since then, we had a webinar with the state on September 16th where we really got into the details of this and needed to decide how we are going to move forward as a city. So just the image on this slide, there's not many images in this presentation, but this one is pretty pertinent. Again, this is a regulation of electric vehicle charging projects as a land use. This is not a mandate to require that EV chargers be placed in the city, that they are paired with development, such as a trigger. You know, you have an apartment and then you have to add in X number of EV charging stations. This has nothing to do with that. This is, should a developer want to voluntarily pursue one of these projects in the city of Evans, that we have a land use path to follow in order to permit that in a predictable manner. So what this really covers, there's really the tier of four types of electric vehicle charging. The first two, the top two is, I'll group them together. It's level 1 and level 2. The top one is a charger, trickle charge, slow charge at someone's private residence. This has nothing to do with that. We aren't regulating that. The second one is level 2 charger, which is oftentimes provided as an amenity at a place of employment. This is somewhere that an employer could, or an employee could take advantage of a charger placed by their employer for use throughout the day. It may be included in a parking lot at a multifamily development, but it's again a slow charge. So those are just regulated, considered use by rights, or there is no regulation from a land use side. The land use aspect applies to the bottom two, which are DCFC. You might hear me say that's a direct current fast charge. Those are the types of electric vehicle charging projects that are provided to the actual public. The kind of third one down, that's the accessory DCFC charging facility. That's what I would imagine would be the most common should this land use get get some traction in the community. And this is really placing those for the paying public on an already existing property that has a different primary land use. So it's at a retail store. It's at somewhere where the public's going to be at. The bottom one is a primary DCFC. Don't imagine many of those will be happening anytime soon in the city of Evans. They're not even really happening in the state as a whole. A primary charging facility would be, it's basically a gas station. It's an automotive fueling station, but omit the petrol and insert the electrical vehicle charging facility. So it has all aspects of a C-store or any other automotive fueling station, and it's really intended for the traveling public. And again, those have very low traction right now in the state. We may see those in the more metro areas, but that's not something that Evans would be looking at the immediate. Okay, so getting into the House bill here. So as Peter said, it is part of the state's vehicle electrification process, which is one of their main core strategies to address some of the perceived challenges and goals by the state. So it's intended to have a blanket process to allow for expanded usage, cost effectiveness, convenience, and viability across Colorado. And really to normalize and mainstream EV charging infrastructure. So the CEO, the Colorado Energy Office, is where this is coming from. In 2023, 2024, they did a permitting study. They contacted all the local jurisdictions across the state to see what were their land use regulations for developing something like this. And that's really why the House bill developed, is because they found there weren't any. So there's very little existing regulations in local governments to regulate this type of development as a land use. And again, as Peter mentioned, it hits back to the transportation as the largest single contributor to greenhouse gas. And you can see two of those interesting stats. There are state goals for 100% zero emission electricity by 2040. So 15 years off from that. That targets some of those other bills. But the second one in particular, at least 70% of all vehicle sales would be EV by 2030. 4 years, 5 years out, hard to say if that's attainable. But again, it's a push, it's a strategy by the state to try to make it so that chargers are as ubiquitous, as common as possible to support those goals should there be the EV market that they are desiring. And then the last one here, so there are multiple compliance options, which I'll go through, but we're looking at the model code option. And really why that is most advantageous, there's many reasons, but think in terms of Evans as a market competitor. This would align Evans with most of the other jurisdictions in the area, so that an EV developer, should they be looking for a place, regardless of the political aspects or the other considerations, is that Evans would just be an equal among peers, that there'd be no other burdensome regulations should they be trying to come in here. So it provides that kind of uniformity and certainty to developers in our community. Looking at the summary of the bill, it's effective last year and applies to municipalities with over 10,000 people. In Appendix A of the Model Unit Land Use Code, Evans was expressly listed as a qualifying jurisdiction. It also applies to counties above 20,000 people. You can see some of the different charging or EV charging development benefits that provides a community. Most notably, it provides surety to existing EV drivers in the community that they can have whatever services that they need in the town where they live. And it also provides a draw for potentially travel and tourism, getting folks into your community should you offer this, and hopefully they would stay and benefit the community in other ways. So by December 31st, 2025, the timing on this is a little soft. I'll say this end of the year is a soft timeline or due date here, but we have to do one of three compliance options. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3 listed out. The top one is shown in black. That is the recommended option. That's the EV charging model code adoption. So really, I've already approached the Colorado Energy Office about this and to kind of get soft input from them. Should the City Council want to move forward with this option, we would further engage with them, and they will provide technical assistance to develop our ordinance and make sure it complies with the House bill. And so that's Everything related to the land use aspect is covered in the model code. I've already got the draft ordinance in a meager form should we want to move that way. The other two options, the first one is a statutory code adoption. We would basically have to on our own it and navigate the House bill as it for strict compliance with the House bill. So we would have to develop all of our own review standards, and we have to have an engagement process with other agencies, the fire district, local electric providers, and there's a lot more restrictions in it for what we can review, and there's a lot of dates that we have to hit in there as far as how quickly we have to be reviewing these projects. So it almost places this land use on a pedestal compared to the EV code. And then the bottom one would be retain our existing permitting regarding EV, which we have none. If we did, the city could opt out, as it states by ordinance or resolution, to retain existing standards. But again, we don't have any, so there's nothing to go off of there. So we're really left with options 1 and 2, and 1 and 2 does appear rather advantageous. So if we select option 1, we go through the model code and guidance document from the CEO. I've already spent a good amount of time in that, wrapping my head around it and what's required on there. There's 2 main components that come out of there: the definitions and standards, which is really what is a EV charging project, what is required, how it can be regulated, the different considerations, and then the second option or component is the actual permitting. So what we have to do to maintain compliance with the state regulations. And each of those components, definitions and standards and permitting, have base options and optional requirements that we can adopt. So we have to adopt the base ones, and you got to think of the perspective of this. The base requirements, again, this is coming from the state's energy goals. So they are the least restrictive. If you only adopt the base options, you don't have any real local land use input. The optional regulations allow you to do so. So it allows you to look at or take into consideration screening, landscaping, lighting, other actual real world aspects of a project that the city would normally regulate. So in my opinion, going with both the base and the optional regulations would be the way to go. As far as the standards and definitions, there are 13 definitions that are base, 12 that are standard, and 12 standards, and then 6 optional standards. And so it really talks more into the zoning aspect. Is it a use by right? Is it done by a special use permit, or is prohibited? And all those other items that I mentioned, parking, setback, screening, those are not addressed in the base standards. So by taking those on, we then give greater control back to the city. So it'd be like any other site plan application. Okay, so touch on some of these. We're only requiring this for DCFC, so those bottom 2 EV charging projects. We have to do it as allowed by use by right in most zone districts. And we can require conformance or we cannot require conformance updates. So if a property were to do one of these, we couldn't require that anything else be brought up to standards on a property. So it really is limited to the charging project alone. Some other topics there. We have to count it towards the minimum parking. So if a project required 40 parking spaces, we couldn't require an additional 4 for these. We would have to assume that into that 40 if the developer so chose to do so. But again, this is voluntary. We're not requiring that developers do this. This would be between a private EV charging developer and a retail developer to coordinate that on their site. All right, looking through some of the optional standards. So we can require that it be lit, go figure, and then a host of other ones. So again, the base code does not require that we stripe it, that it complies with setbacks, that it complies with site visibility triangles or site distance triangles. So everything else would apply just like a standard land use, signage, and dimensional. We have dimensional and design standards in Chapter 1806 of our Code for Non-Residential, and so this would fall in line with that. Okay, then for the permitting process, which is more of the actions that the city must do to facilitate this with EV developers. That we have to provide all these materials in a accessible, user-friendly and transparent online format, that we allow for digital applications, don't require in-person, and no type of odd or overly burdensome requirements. These are all easy. City of Evans already does this with all of our other land use applications, so this permitting would be no different from any of our other applications that we currently process. Optional permitting, we can develop a new application, which I would recommend, that's specific to EV charging, that we use an online application. We've recently have worked to roll out CitizenServe to track online application submittals, that we would hold pre-app meetings. We already hold those for any of our other land use cases. Assign a single staff person, that would be coming through me. Everything else that we do there, except the bottom one, is using parallel review for all permits of EV charging. I don't recommend approving or adding that optional one on there. That would allow for basically parallel processing of the planning and building permit. In my opinion, I believe that they should get through the EV charging project or permit first on the land use side before advancing to the building side, and it really just provides protection for the actual developer. So in case there was an issue with the permit, they haven't done all the technical work. Some code examples of what we would actually be looking at in the ordinance. So this would only be limited to the primary and accessory DCFC EV charging. They have their own specific definitions that would be adopted into chapter 18.11, which is our definitions chapter. And that we cannot require a land use permit for those other two lesser permits. We also, one of the biggest topics of all this is zoning. On the base code, you have to allow them in all zone districts. I'm proposing, and there is an exception for this, that we limit them in low density housing, which would be our state, our R1E, and our low density residential, which is our R1 zone districts, as well as any neighborhood commercial zone district, which is our C1 zone district. This is similar to where a traditional gas station would fall land use wise. So it really mirrors that, but that would be what the recommendation is, excluding from those three zone districts: estate, low density residential, and neighborhood commercial. And also there is a conditional use permit option on this. I would propose that everything would be an administrative review process similar to a site plan. And you can see that there would be two permitting options: the accessory DCFC, that's adding something onto an existing site. That would be a standalone EV charger permit, fairly minor, low cost. You're adding something to a site, your scope is limited to that aspect alone. If it's a primary DCFC, think again, the larger automotive fueling, that would be a full site development, and in that case, it would just be done by a typical site plan process, which again is already administrative. Okay, so as far as integration goes, it had been recommended there was two different options there to take all those different portions. So say the zoning portion, and that lives in the zoning chapter, the procedures lives in procedures and whatnot, or have a specific standalone EV charging section. I don't recommend that simply because it doesn't align with any of our other land uses, and I don't know why we would treat this any different than any of our other land use types, given it's just regulating the land development aspects of the use itself. And then also to note, this is not subject to any other, the model code. It doesn't impact building, fire, any other code, so they would have to still be in compliance with anything else adopted by the city of Evans. Impact to Evans, we don't have any codes on this right now, so if someone were to come in with this land use type, we don't have any clear process for them to go through, so just treating it as any other land use, we currently would be providing the applicant a disservice, since we would have to kind of invent this on the fly. So by having the model code adopted, we can have a better process for that. And overall, we're not expecting this to be really any large impact to this city. I don't think that we would have any of these in the very near future. I've never heard of this being an actual inquiry from a developer since I've been here at the city. Perhaps other staff has, but from what I've heard, that has not been the case. But if that were to be a request, we would at least now have an ability to be responsive to a developer. As far as our timeline, so our compliance per the House bill is by December 31st. This is a soft timeline. I've discussed this with the state, and it sounds like we're very much in line with the other jurisdictions all across the state that are faced with this. So really by that time, we need to have one of our three options adopted. Our compliance report is more of the hard deadline. That's when we have to provide evidence to the state by March 1st that we have selected one of the options and taken action on that. So that would be a copy of the ordinance should the city council wish to do so. And then in that calendar year of 2026, we have to document any instance where we have any type of EV permitting request, whether that's the accessory under the permit or a primary under the site plan, and then provide that to the state by 2027. I'm sure they're doing that as a monitoring aspect to see how successful this this program was. I'm sure you will ask on the penalties if we don't take action. I discussed this with CEO and their consultant MIG. There was no direct response on this. The simple response was it is required by the state. It was adopted. I think of all the ones that are coming down the pike from the state, this is one of the easier ones to follow and adopt in a strategic standpoint, since it does have very little impact to the city, but we can certainly demonstrate that we are compliance and possibly reserve some of our concerns for more impactful House bills that the state or pushes down. And then also, should we move forward with this, we'll be responsible for creating application materials. There are templates and things like that the model code provides, but otherwise comply with those implementation regulations. I don't know if you have anything there.
Yeah, so basically today's presentation is to seek direction from council with preparation of the ordinance. Like any other Title 18 amendments, we would take that to the City Planning Commission, have them review, provide recommendation to the City Council on the actual ordinance itself, and then, of course, first, second reading, public hearing with the City Council. I would like to point out again that on one hand, yes, the state's telling us we have to define these EV charging facilities, charging stations. They have to be part of our land use code. On the other hand, this gives us the ability to regulate them. Very similar, I guess, to any other commercial business, particularly just regular old gas stations, right? We have regulations for gas stations with setbacks, with lighting, with circulation, access, so on and so forth. So on one hand, yes, if you would indulge, right, it's somewhat of a state telling a city on what to do with their zoning codes, but on the other hand, this also actually helps us in case we do have a request. We are at least then prepared to address it. So the model code, again, through the presentations we've set through, seems like the best option, because yes, it establishes this as a permissible land use, but it also ensures that our regulations would be, if you will, accepted at the state level. I guess that's really what we're after is, if we need to do it, let's do it in such a way that the state is okay with it. Yes, there's may not be any penalties, but should we have any grants, any type of, a request of the state, we don't want to put the city at risk of not having those grants approved by the state. So with that, we can turn it over for any questions and certainly discussion.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add those other municipalities at the bottom of the screen there: Berthoud, Superior, Wellington, Federal Heights, Centennial. Those are a variety, because I questioned the Colorado Energy Office of, where is the city positioned as far as our request to, or not a request, but our action to move through this process. And they provided several other examples of municipalities, some local, some smaller than us, some well off, some severely disadvantaged communities that are all going through this right now. And again, the takeaway there is this: regardless of the perspective politically, it puts Evans on an evil or on the even playing field with other municipalities for this land use type. So a lot of other jurisdictions are currently doing the exact same thing all over the state, and some have not engaged at all with the state. Some, like Fort Collins, Denver, may have had regulations like this for 5-10 years by now. So it's kind of just evening the playing field, but just wanted to highlight that as well. But yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the presentation on it. I'm in favor of moving forward with the base and the optionals as you have recommended. I agree or disagree. I know the state is pushing it. We're going to have to comply with it. This, as you said, puts us on an even playing field. We already know that Greeley already, has a bunch of EV stations around their community as well as other communities as well. So I'm in favor of moving forward. And plus, this could open up opportunities, you said, for grants and for us to get grants as well. So kind of my question going into this is, I know since we're going to possibly go ahead and move forward with this, have we looked as a city about putting any EV charging stations at, like, say, like Riverside Park or here at the community complex, taking advantage of some of those grant fundings and maybe putting one or two here at the city and maybe a couple at the Riverside Park and other those large areas?
We've had high-level discussions, but I wouldn't say it went any further than that at this point. Just with all the other infrastructure projects that we've been focusing staff time and resources on. So I think obviously the EV discussion, EVs have become more common throughout the community and for folks coming in to visit our community. So I do think that at some point we need to take a look at that. I do have some concerns about the availability of electricity and making sure that that we're not taking away from development, as that's certainly a concern. But nonetheless, I think it is something that we could certainly dive deeper into if that's the will of the council.
Right. No, I agree. There's definitely concern with that. And I think that's concern around the whole state is about the electrical infrastructure and how it's going to handle all this additional electricity for these vehicles and everything. But that's something to just keep in mind. Like I said, some of the new development going on in Greeley is adopting those EV charging stations, and the developers are putting that in. But I can certainly see a developer wanting to come in, building a larger facility and maybe want to put that. So we need to have those permits in process. So I'm in favor of it. So we'll just go with your recommendations on it. Let's not make it as restrictive. Let's make it at least business friendly and not put so much restrictions on it, but allow them to do it. So thank you.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. I also agree that this is something we should do, and I think that we should obviously take the model code and the options. The only thing I question is we have a home rule charter. How can the state force us to adapt this? I mean, again, I think it's a good move. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but I'm just saying for when it comes down the pike, when it's something that we as a council are vehemently against, how is this possible?
Certainly. And I don't know if Drew wants to address that, but certainly that has been topic of discussion, many of bills. When items become of state interest, I think that's where the state legislature can come in and help us regulate our land uses because it's a state interest. But Drew, you can go ahead and.
Our home rule charter does preempt state regulation unless it's a matter of statewide concern. The legislature can determine that something's statewide concern. In this case, it seems like a fairly weak case that it is, given that we have 3 options, which includes opting out. So I would say that this would be voluntary on our part. There may be a reporting requirement that could be litigated by other cities. I don't see that happening. I'm not sure that it is, but I think it's a good point. I don't think it should be adopted on the grounds that we are preempted by the state law. I think that the city should take the position, as it is in the Colorado Constitution, that our charter preempts state law in this regard.
Okay, that was my only question. And again, I just want to reiterate, I am for this. I don't I'm not arguing we shouldn't do it. I just wanted that clarification.
And I think that's a very fair question because we have another issue that we are working on internally pertaining to ADUs and how those impact. But there's also similar legislation that we're trying to evaluate right now. How does that issue, how are we required to follow that issue? So we'll be evaluating that, and if we need to bring it forward, we'll bring that at a later date.
Councilmember Johnson?
I echo what was said. What I wanted to say is, yes, I am for this, and I think it's important to also have that diversity of options for our developers. And even for the city, if at one point we decide to move forward in that direction. Granted, I know at this moment we have other things we have to take care of, but at least there's that option, and we have something in writing to help developers and the city also kind of figure out what to do. So we're not far behind. And as you know, right now, people are tending to buy more electrical vehicles, and so it's only a matter of time when we are going to have to discuss this anyway. So if we can get ahead of it, that's fantastic. So, but I am for that first option, the model code adoption as well. So I think it definitely, and then going back to what you mentioned, we used to have an EV charge station in Riverside Library. I'm not sure if it's still there. Yeah. It's not there anymore. So FYI, we did at some point.
I also support staff's recommendation.
All right, well, thank you. So it seems like, yeah, so you're the base plus the options, what you recommended in the first one. So awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. That was all on our agenda for this evening for the work session. So we'll take a